In the year 2187, Diana Wells stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror of her dormitory. Her calloused hands and the slight mechanical parts at her wrists marked her as what society now called a labor girl, one of the millions of humans, changed for industrial work in Earth's huge factory complexes. At 32, she had spent her entire life in Service District 7, making parts for space colonies. Diana rubbed her tired eyes and looked around the small room she called home. The walls were gray and bare except for a single picture of green, fields and blue sky, a place she had never seen in person. Her bed was hard and narrow, her few belongings stored in a metal box under it. This was all a labor girl could expect from life. The message board in the hallway had been buzzing with news for weeks. The frontier planet Novaris was accepting applications for mail-order brides. The colony world needed strong women to help build its future, and the ads promised a life of freedom under open skies. Diana had watched the video 100 times, imagining herself standing on real grass, breathing fresh air instead of the filtered factory atmosphere. "You really going through with this?" asked Meg, another labor girl who lived down the hall. Meg leaned against the doorframe, her own mechanical enhancements visible at her neck and along her arms. "What's left for me here?" Diana asked, gesturing around the tiny room. 20 more years of assembly line work until my parts wear out and they retire me to the subsistence levels?" Meg nodded slowly. "They say the colony men don't much like our kind. They want natural women, not factory models." Diana zipped up her bag. "The ad said they need strong women who can work. That's me. Besides, it's my only chance to see a real sky before I die." The application process took 3 months. Diana spent every credit she had saved over 15 years of work. The officials looked at her strangely when she handed over her life savings, but they stamped her papers anyway. 1 week later, she boarded the colony ship with 19 other women, all hoping for better lives on Novaris. The journey lasted 3 months in cryosleep. Diana dreamed of open fields and a kind man who would see past her augmentations to the woman beneath. When she awoke, her muscles were stiff and her mouth was dry, but hope filled her heart as she looked out the viewport at the blue-green world below. Novaris Colony had a single spaceport, a collection of prefabricated buildings surrounded by newly constructed homes and businesses. As Diana and the other women were led from the ship, she saw the wide-open spaces she had dreamed about. The gravity was slightly lighter than Earth's, making her feel almost buoyant as she walked. The colonial matchmaker was a stern woman named Patty Gould, who looked at Diana's papers with a frown. "Labor girl, huh? Should have mentioned that in your application." "I listed my work experience and physical enhancements," Diana said. "It's all there." Patty sighed. "Well, we'll see. Your first meeting is in an hour. Try to cover those up." She gestured to Diana's wrist enhancements. Diana pulled down her sleeves, though the shape of the metal was still visible beneath the fabric. She waited in a small room with 5 other women, all looking nervous but excited. One by one, they were called out. Some returned smiling, having found their matches. Others came back looking uncertain. When Diana's turn came, she walked into the meeting room with her head high. A man named Alan Porter waited there, well-dressed and clearly wealthy by colony standards. His smile faltered when he saw her. "This is the woman from Earth?" he asked Patty, who stood nearby. "Diana Wells, yes," Patty said. Alan walked around Diana as if inspecting livestock. "Let me see your hands," he demanded. Diana held them out, unable to hide the mechanical parts that gave her the strength to lift industrial equipment. Alan stepped back with a look of disgust. "I ordered a real woman, not some factory model. This won't do." Diana felt her face grow hot with shame as he walked out. Patty gave her a look that might have been pity. "Sometimes the first match doesn't work out. Let's try again tomorrow." But tomorrow brought the same result. And the day after. 5 different men, all with the same reaction. By the 5th rejection, Diana began to lose hope. "I'm sorry," Patty told her after the last man left. "But the colony's policy is clear. No refunds for unsuccessful matches. You'll need to find work to support yourself or save for a ticket back to Earth." Diana felt her world crumbling. What kind of work can I get here? With your enhancements? The mines are always looking for strong backs. 3-year contracts, it's hard work, but they don't care what you look like. Diana sat in the spaceport terminal fighting back tears. The mines meant trading one prison for another. She had spent her life savings on a dream that had turned to dust in just 3 days. As the sun began to set outside the large windows, casting long shadows across the floor, Diana noticed a man watching her from across the room. He was tall and weathered, with skin tanned by real sunlight and hands that showed years of hard work. Unlike the men she had met earlier, he wore simple clothes, sturdy pants, a plain shirt, and boots covered in dust. After a few minutes, he approached. Diana braced herself for more cruel words. "You're the labor girl they brought in on yesterday's ship?" he asked. His voice was deep and quiet. "Yes," Diana answered, too tired to hide her nature anymore. The man nodded slowly. "I'm John Harlow. I run a ranch in the Outlands, about 50 miles from the settlement. Been looking for a partner, someone strong enough to help with the work." Diana looked up, surprised. "A partner? Marriage, partnership, whatever you want to call it. I need someone who won't break when things get tough out there." He looked at her hands with interest rather than disgust. "Those enhancements? They help you lift heavy things?" "Yes. I was designed for industrial assembly work. I can lift 4 times what a regular person can." For the first time, John Harlow smiled slightly. "That could be useful on a ranch." Diana studied him carefully. "Why me?" "There are natural women here looking for husbands." John shrugged. "I don't need pretty. I need capable. And from the look of you sitting here while others got matched, I'm guessing you need a place to belong. So maybe we can help each other." Diana stood, suddenly aware of how tall she was compared to most women. John Harlow didn't seem to mind. He looked at her with honest appraisal, not a hint of the disgust she had seen in the other men's eyes. "It's rough out there," he warned. "Dangerous sometimes. Not many comforts." Diana thought of the mines, the factories on Earth, her tiny gray room. Then she thought of open sky and a place where her strength might be valued rather than despised. "When do we leave?" she asked. Diana sat beside John Harlow in his ground vehicle as they drove away from the colony settlement. She watched through the window as buildings became fewer and the landscape opened up into wide, rolling hills. The road turned from smooth pavement to rough dirt, but John handled the bumps with ease, clearly used to the journey. "How long have you been on Navarus?" Diana asked, breaking the silence that had stretched between them for nearly an hour. 10 years, John replied, keeping his eyes on the uneven road. "Came with the first wave of settlers. Back then there was nothing but the landing pad and some tents." Diana studied his profile. John was not handsome in the way the men in the videos had been. His face was weathered from sun and wind, with small lines around his eyes and a scar along his jaw. But there was something solid about him that made Diana feel more at ease than she had since leaving Earth. "Your ranch," she said. "What kind of work do you do there?" "Raise cattle, special breed made to eat the native grasses. Sell the meat and hides to the colony and to off-world merchants." He glanced at her hands. "There's always things that need lifting, fixing, building. The work never ends." As they drove farther from the settlement, Diana saw her first glimpse of the truly wild parts of Novarus. Strange plants with purple leaves stretched toward the sky. Animals that looked like a mix between deer and lizards scattered as the vehicle approached. "Those are grazers," John explained when he noticed her watching them. "Harmless. Good eating if you can catch one." After 3 hours of driving, they crested a hill, and Diana saw the ranch for the first time. A 2-story house made of dark wood and stone stood in a cleared area. Behind it were several large buildings that Diana guessed were barns or storage. A tall fence surrounded a wide field where large animals that must be the cattle grazed on, bluish grass. "It's not much," John said as he stopped the vehicle in front of the house. "But it's mine. Built most of it myself." Diana stepped out, feeling the soft ground under her boots. The air smelled fresh and clean, with hints of unfamiliar scents. She took a deep breath, savoring the sensation of being outside without pollution filters. "It's wonderful," she said honestly. John led her inside the house. The main room was simple but comfortable, with handmade wooden furniture and a large fireplace. Through a doorway, Diana could see a kitchen with basic cooking equipment. "Your room is upstairs," John said, pointing to a staircase. "Bathroom's down the hall. Water comes from a well, so don't waste it. Power's from solar cells and wind with backup generators for emergencies." Diana placed her single bag on the floor. "When do I start work?" John looked at her with surprise, then nodded in approval. "Rest today. We start at dawn tomorrow." True to his word, John woke Diana before the sun rose the next morning. After a quick meal of eggs and bread, he took her outside to show her the daily tasks. The cattle needed feeding and checking for illness. The fences needed constant repair from damage caused by weather and wildlife. Equipment broke down and required fixing. John explained each job clearly, showing Diana what needed to be done without talking down to her. When a generator stopped working, Diana examined it closely. "I can fix this," she said. "I used to repair similar units in the factory." John handed her a toolbox without question and left her to work. When he returned an hour later, the generator was running smoothly again. "Good work," he said simply. Diana felt a warmth in her chest at the praise. Days passed quickly on the ranch. Diana's body, strong from years of factory labor, adapted to the new demands placed on it. Her mechanical enhancements proved useful for lifting heavy supplies and machinery. For the first time, she felt her modified body was an advantage rather than a mark of shame. John was a quiet man who rarely spoke unless necessary, but he was never cruel. He treated Diana with respect, valuing her work and listening when she suggested improvements to the ranch operations. At night, they ate dinner together, sometimes talking about their days, sometimes sitting in comfortable silence. 2 weeks after her arrival, Diana was checking the fence line when she saw movement in the tall grass beyond the property. A large creature with 6 legs and sharp claws emerged, its eyes fixed on her. Diana had never seen anything like it, but the predatory intent was clear. She backed away slowly, reaching for the communication device John had given her. Before she could call for help, the creature charged. Diana's training kicked in. In the factories, accidents happened often, and labor girls were taught to react quickly. She dodged to the side and grabbed a metal fence post that had been set aside for repairs. The creature turned and leaped again. Diana swung the post with all her enhanced strength, catching the animal across its head. It fell to the ground, stunned but still moving. Diana hit it again, and this time it stayed down. She was breathing hard when John arrived, having seen the commotion from across the field. "Shredder," he said, looking at the dead creature. "They usually stay in the deep brush." He looked at Diana with new eyes. "Most people don't survive their first shredder encounter." Diana shrugged, trying to hide how shaken she felt. "I hit it with the post." John knelt to examine the creature's crushed skull. "With quite a lot of force, I'd say." He stood and faced her. "Those enhancements saved your life today." That night, John showed Diana how to skin and clean the shredder. "Hide makes good leather," he explained. "Meat's too tough for humans, but we can use it for bait." As they worked side by side, Diana felt something shift between them. John's usual reserve had softened slightly. When their hands accidentally touched over the work, neither pulled away immediately. "Town folks don't understand," John said as they finished their task. "Out here, what matters is what you can do, not what you look like doing it." Diana looked up and found him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. For the first time since arriving on Noveris, she felt truly seen. Not as a labor girl, not as a factory model, but as Diana Wells, a woman of value and strength. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for bringing me here." John nodded once. "Thank you for coming." In his simple words, Diana heard what went unsaid, that perhaps they had both found something they needed. 6 months passed on the ranch, and Diana no longer thought of herself as a visitor. This was her home now, and John was no longer just her employer. What they had was not quite a marriage in the traditional sense, but it was a partnership built on mutual respect and growing affection. Spring came to Navarres, bringing heavy rains that turned the fields bright with strange blue and purple plants. The cattle grew fat on the new growth, and John spoke of a good selling season ahead. Diana had learned the rhythm of ranch life and found peace in the daily tasks, so different from the endless sameness of the factory. One morning, John announced they needed to move the herd to higher ground. Rains filled the lower pasture too. Much, he explained over breakfast. Gotta take them up to the ridge fields until it dries out. Diana nodded, already planning the day's work in her head. Moving the herd was always difficult, requiring both of them to work together to keep the animals from wandering off or being picked off by predators. They set out after breakfast, John on his riding animal, a horse-like creature the colonists called a runner, and Diana on foot. Her enhanced strength allowed her to walk all day without tiring, and she preferred to be on the ground where she could quickly respond to problems. The herd moved slowly through the wet fields, their 6 legs splashing in the shallow water. Diana walked behind them, occasionally calling out to stragglers. John rode alongside, guiding the lead animals toward the path that wound up to the ridge. They were halfway to their destination when Diana noticed a change in the sky. Dark clouds gathered with unusual speed, and the wind picked up, carrying a chill that hadn't been there before. "John," she called, pointing to the sky. "Storm coming." John looked up and frowned. "That's not right. Weather report said clear all day." He pulled out his communication device, but the screen showed no signal. "Comms are down. Must be interference from the storm." Diana felt uneasy. In 6 months, she had never seen clouds move so fast or look so threatening. As if sensing her thoughts, the cattle grew restless, jostling against each other. "We need to hurry," John said, spurring his runner forward to speed up the herd. The first lightning strike hit a tree not 50 yards away, splitting it with a deafening crack. The cattle panicked, breaking from their orderly line and scattering in all directions. John shouted commands, trying to regain control, but another lightning bolt struck, this time hitting the ground near the center of the herd. What happened next seemed to move in slow motion for Diana. The largest bull in the herd, frightened, beyond reason, charged directly at John. His runner reared up in fear, throwing John to the ground. The bull kept coming, its massive weight and 6 powerful legs bearing down on the fallen man. Diana ran faster than she had ever moved, her mechanical enhancements pushing her muscles beyond normal human limits. She reached John just as the bull was about to trample him, grabbing the animal's horns with her augmented hands and using her momentum to twist its head aside. The bull's charge carried it past John, missing him by inches. The victory was short-lived. The bull, enraged by Diana's interference, turned and charged again. This time, Diana couldn't get out of the way fast enough. The animal's shoulder slammed into her side, sending her flying into a rock outcropping. Pain exploded through her body, but her reinforced spine prevented what would have been a fatal injury to a normal human. John had regained his feet and grabbed a shock prod from his fallen gear. He jabbed it at the bull, driving it away with electrical pulses. The animal bellowed in anger but retreated, joining the rest of the scattered herd. "Diana!" John was at her side instantly, his face pale with worry. "How bad?" Diana tried to stand, but fell back with a gasp of pain. "Ribs broken, maybe internal damage." Her factory training included basic medical knowledge. Labor girls often had to assess their own injuries to determine if they could continue working. The storm was getting worse, rain now falling in sheets that reduced visibility to a few yards. John looked around desperately, then made a decision. "Cave system in those rocks," he said, pointing to a formation about 100 yards away. "We need shelter until this passes." Diana tried to stand again, but couldn't. Without hesitation, John lifted her in his arms. Despite being strong from years of ranch work, he struggled with her weight. "Put me down," Diana said. "I can walk if you help me." John ignored her, his jaw set in determination as he carried her toward the rocks. By the time they reached the cave entrance, he was gasping for breath, his muscles trembling with effort. The cave was shallow but dry, providing shelter from the wind and rain. John gently set Diana down against the wall, then collapsed beside her, breathing hard. "Foolish," Diana said, but her voice was gentle. "Could have hurt yourself." John looked at her, his eyes serious. "You took a charging bull for me. Least I could do." Diana's enhanced body was already working to repair her injuries, but she knew it would take time. "Need to get back to the ranch," she said. "Medical supplies there." John shook his head. "Storm's too bad. Com's still dead. We wait." Hours passed. The storm showed no signs of letting up, and Diana's condition worsened. Her breathing became labored, and John's worry grew. "Something punctured inside," she managed to say. "Lung, maybe." John's face hardened with determination. "I'm getting you back to the ranch." The rain had turned the ground to mud, making walking difficult, let alone carrying an injured person. But John refused to leave Diana in the cave. He fashioned a crude stretcher from his coat and broken branches, then carefully helped her onto it. "This will hurt," he warned before lifting one end of the stretcher. Diana nodded, gritting her teeth against the pain. As John began the slow journey back to the ranch, pulling the stretcher through the mud and rain, she watched his face. No one had ever fought so hard for her before. In the factories, an injured labor girl would be repaired, if the cost was justified, discarded if not. The journey took hours, with John stopping occasionally to catch his breath before continuing. By the time the ranch house came into view, the storm had passed and stars shone in the clearing sky. John's clothes were caked with mud, his face gray with exhaustion, but he never complained. Inside the house, he used the medical supplies to treat Diana's injuries as best he could. His hands, usually so sure with tools and animals, were gentle as they wrapped her ribs and administered pain medication. "Thank you," Diana whispered as he finished. John sat beside her bed, his large hand carefully holding hers. "When that bull charged me," he said slowly, "I thought I was dead. But you were there." He paused, struggling to find words. "No one's ever put themselves in danger for me before." Diana looked at their joined hands, her mechanical wrist joint next to his human skin. "No one's ever carried me through a storm before." That night, as Diana drifted in and out of sleep, she felt John's presence beside her bed, keeping watch. Something had changed between them in the storm, something deeper than partnership or friendship. Neither of them had put it into words yet, but it was there, like a seed taking root. Diana recovered slowly from her injuries. Her enhanced body could heal faster than a normal human's, but the damage had been severe. For 2 weeks, she stayed in bed while John took care of her, and somehow managed all the ranch work alone. At night, he slept in a chair beside her bed, ready if she needed anything. As Diana grew stronger, she noticed changes in John. He spoke more often, sharing stories about his early days on Novaris. He touched her more freely now, his hand lingering on hers when he brought her food or medicine. Sometimes she caught him watching her with an expression that made her heart beat faster. By the 3rd week, Diana could walk around the house. She sat at the kitchen table watching John prepare a simple meal of vegetables and meat. "We need supplies," John said as he set plates on the table. "Running low on medicine and food. Haven't been to town since before the storm." Diana nodded. The closest supply depot was at a small outpost about halfway between the ranch and the Boer main settlement. They usually went once a month for things they couldn't produce themselves. "I can go with you," she said. John looked at her doubtfully. "You're still healing." "I'm strong enough to ride in the vehicle," Diana insisted. "And I need fresh air." John agreed reluctantly. The next morning, they set out for the outpost. Diana enjoyed being outside again, watching the landscape pass by. Her body still ached, but being confined to the house had been harder on her spirit than the physical pain. The outpost consisted of a supply store, a small medical clinic, and a gathering place where the scattered outland ranchers could meet and trade news. As they pulled up, Diana saw several vehicles already parked outside. "Busy today," John commented as he helped Diana from the vehicle. Inside the store, 5 other ranchers stood talking with the owner, Dale Wilson. Their conversation stopped when John and Diana entered. Diana was used to this reaction. Most of the other Outlanders tolerated her presence because of John, but they never fully accepted her. "Heard you lost some cattle in that freak storm," one man said to John, ignoring Diana completely. "8 head, John confirmed. Could have been worse." Another rancher, a thin man named Pete, looked at Diana with unconcealed dislike. "Surprised. Your factory model survived. Heard she got between a bull and a hard place." Diana felt John tense beside her, but before he could respond, Dale spoke up. "Enough of that talk in my store, Pete. Go bother someone else if you can't be civil." Pete shrugged and walked away, but his words had already done their damage. Diana was reminded that no matter how much John valued her, others would always see her as less than human. John and Diana gathered their supplies quickly. As they were paying, Dale lowered his voice. "You should know, the settlement's been having problems with their atmospheric processor. Engineers say it could fail completely within a month." John frowned. "How bad?" "Bad enough that they're calling for evacuations of the outer sectors. The main settlement should be fine. They have backup systems. But if the processor fails completely, the air quality in the Outlands could become dangerous." This was serious news. Novaris was still being terraformed, its atmosphere not yet fully compatible with human life. The processors maintained breathable air, especially in areas far from the main settlement. "Any engineers coming from Earth?" John asked. Dale shook his head. "Transport ship isn't due for 2 more months. They're trying to fix it with local talent, but no one here has the right experience." On the drive back to the ranch, John was unusually quiet. Diana knew he was worried about the processor. If it failed, they might have to abandon the ranch temporarily, maybe even return to the settlement. "I could look at it," Diana said finally. John glanced at her in surprise. "The processor?" "Yes. Labor girls are trained to maintain similar systems in the factories. The principle should be the same even if the scale is different." John considered this. "They wouldn't let you near it. Settlement folks are even worse than the Outlanders when it comes to labor girls." "They might, if things get bad enough," Diana replied. "People change their minds quickly when they can't breathe." 2 days later, the news came over the emergency broadcast system. The atmospheric processor was failing faster than expected. All Outland residents were advised to move to the settlement until repairs could be made. John paced the living room after hearing the message. "We can't leave the ranch for months. The cattle would be lost. The crops would fail." Diana watched him, her mind working on a solution. "Let me try to help them fix it," she said again. John stopped pacing. "These are the same people who rejected you as not good enough to marry. Why would you help them?" "Because this is my home now," Diana said simply, "and because it's the right thing to do." John looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll take you to the settlement tomorrow." The journey to the main settlement took most of the next day. As they approached, Diana saw that much had changed since her arrival 6 months ago. New buildings had sprung up and many more people filled the streets. But the most noticeable difference was the air. Even though the processor was still functioning, the quality was poor, with a slight haze visible and a metallic taste that hadn't been there before. At the administration building, John asked to speak with someone about the processor problem. After a long wait, they were shown into an office where Frank Mitchell, the colonial administrator, sat behind a desk piled with reports. "John Harlow," he said with obvious relief. "Good to see you. Have you come to register for temporary housing? We're allocating spaces for Outland families." "No," John said. "We've come because Diana thinks she can help with the processor." Frank looked at Diana for the first time, his eyes widening slightly as he noticed her mechanical enhancements. "Help how, exactly?" Diana stepped forward. "I worked maintenance on similar systems back on Earth. Labor girls are trained to repair atmospheric controls in the factory complexes." Frank's expression changed from surprise to skepticism. "Our engineers have been working around the clock. What makes you think you can do what they can't?" Because your engineers were trained to operate the system, not repair it at the component level, Diana explained. I was built to understand how these systems work from the inside out. Frank seemed ready to dismiss her, but a young woman burst into the office without knocking. Sir, the Western Sector readings are critical. We need to evacuate another 300 people immediately. Frank closed his eyes briefly, the weight of the crisis visible on his face. When he opened them again, he looked at Diana with new consideration. Can you really help? Diana met his gaze steadily. Let me try. Frank Mitchell led Diana and John to the Atmospheric Processor Control Center, a large building at the edge of the settlement. Inside, a team of tired-looking engineers huddled around screens displaying complicated diagrams and flashing red warnings. This is Diana Wells, Frank announced. She has experience with similar systems on Earth. She's going to take a look. The lead engineer, a woman named Karen, looked Diana up and down, her eyes lingering on the mechanical parts visible at Diana's wrists. We don't need a labor girl to tell us our business, she said coldly. Frank's face hardened. People are being evacuated as we speak, Karen. We're out of options and out of time. Let her look. Reluctantly, Karen showed Diana to the main control panel. Diana studied the screens carefully, taking in the information. The system was larger than those she had worked with, but the principles were the same. After several minutes of silence, she spoke. The main filtration array is failing. The backup systems are overloading because they're trying to compensate. If they burn out too, the whole system will collapse. Karen crossed her arms. We know that already. What we don't know is why the main array is failing or how to fix it. Diana thought for a moment. I need to see the physical system, not just the controls. Karen looked to Frank, who nodded. Take her to the processor chamber. The atmospheric processor was housed in a massive room filled with humming machinery. In the center, a tower of metal and glass rose 30 feet high, with tubes and wires connecting it to smaller units around the room. Diana could hear that the rhythm of the machinery was wrong, the sounds uneven and strained. This was designed for a smaller colony, Diana observed. You've expanded too quickly, and the system can't keep up. Karen nodded reluctantly. The next upgrade isn't scheduled for 6 months. We need to make this one last until then. Diana walked around the main array, her enhanced senses detecting subtle problems that the regular engineers might have missed. Finally, she stopped at a section near the bottom of the tower. Here, she said. The primary filtration cells are contaminated with something that isn't being processed correctly. The system is working harder and harder to clean the air, but it can't remove this particular contaminant. What contaminant? Karen asked, her professional curiosity overcoming her dislike of Diana. Diana touched the metal casing. I'm not sure. Something in the native atmosphere that your sensors aren't programmed to detect. She thought for a moment. I need tools and access to the internal components. Karen hesitated, then gave instructions to an assistant who brought a toolkit. Diana knelt beside the processor and began carefully removing the outer panels. Her enhanced hands worked with precision, disconnecting delicate components without damaging them. Inside, she found what she had suspected. The filtration cells were coated with a thin, purplish film that seemed to be growing rather than simply collecting. It's biological, she said, showing the others. Some kind of microorganism that's feeding on the chemicals in your filters. Karen leaned in to look. How do we kill it without shutting down the system? We can't turn off the processor for more than a few minutes. Diana thought about the problem. On Earth, similar issues sometimes arose in the factory air systems. We need to introduce a cleaning agent that will kill the organisms but won't harm the filters or create toxic byproducts. For the next 3 hours, Diana worked with Karen and the other engineers to create a solution. They tested samples of the organism against various compounds until they found one that worked. Then came the hard part, introducing the cleaning agent into the system without shutting it down completely. I'll need to access the main intake manually, Diana explained. Someone will have to go inside the primary chamber while the system is running at minimal capacity. Frank shook his head. Too dangerous. The air in there would be toxic even with a breathing mask, and the pressure changes could crush a person. Not me, Diana said quietly. My lungs are reinforced and my skeletal structure can withstand the pressure. Labor girls are built to work in hazardous conditions. John, who had been silently watching from the side, stepped forward. No. Find another way. Diana took his hand. There isn't one. Not in time. People will start dying soon if the air quality gets worse. She looked into his eyes. I can do this, John. This is why I was made. John wanted to argue, but he saw the determination in her face. Finally, he nodded, though his expression remained troubled. The engineers prepared the cleaning solution and a delivery system that Diana would carry into the chamber. John helped her into a protective suit, though they both knew it would provide only minimal protection against the conditions. Inside, I'll be waiting right here, he promised as they sealed the helmet. Diana entered the chamber through a small maintenance door. Inside, the air was thin and acrid, burning her throat despite her enhanced respiratory system. The noise was deafening, and the pressure made her ears pop painfully. She pushed forward, following the path she had memorized from the system diagrams. Attio. The main intake valve, Diana attached the delivery system and started the flow of the cleaning solution. She watched as the purple film began to dissolve almost immediately. The system would be clean within hours and the processor would return to normal function. Her task complete, Diana turned to leave, but a sudden surge in the system caused a pressure spike. She was thrown against a metal support beam, her helmet, cracking against the hard surface. Warning lights flashed inside her suit as the chamber's toxic atmosphere began to seep in. Diana fought to stay conscious as she made her way back to the maintenance door. Her enhanced body was already working to filter the toxins, but the damage was mounting. Just as her vision began to blur, she felt the door open and strong arms pull her through. John carried her to the medical area where doctors waited. They removed her helmet and began treatment immediately. Diana drifted in and out of consciousness, aware of John's presence beside her but unable to speak. Hours later, she woke to find herself in a hospital bed. John sat in a chair nearby, his face haggard with worry. When he saw her eyes open, he moved to her side instantly. The processor? She asked, her voice weak. Working perfectly, John said, taking her hand. The engineers say it's running better than before. They're already implementing your design changes to prevent the problem from happening again. Diana tried to sit up, but John gently pressed her back. Rest. The doctor says you'll recover, but you need time. A knock at the door interrupted them. Frank Mitchell entered, looking uncomfortable but determined. How is she? He asked John. Awake. Talking. Going to be fine, John answered, his voice carrying a warning that Frank should tread carefully. Frank approached the bed. Miss Wells, I want to thank you personally for what you did. You saved the colony. He cleared his throat. I also owe you an apology. When you first arrived, our policies and prejudices prevented you from finding a place here. That was wrong. Diana looked at him steadily. I found my place anyway, she said, glancing at John. Frank nodded. Yes, you did. And now you've earned the respect of everyone in the settlement. He hesitated. The council has voted to offer you both citizenship rights and to provide whatever supplies you need for your ranch. It's the least we can do. After Frank left, Diana and John were alone again. John sat on the edge of the bed, still holding her hand. You could stay here in the settlement now, he said quietly. They'd accept you. You'd have an easier life. Diana looked at him in surprise. Do you want me to stay here? No, John said quickly. But I want you to have a choice. A real one. Not just taking the only option available. Diana thought about the settlement with its comforts and convenience. Then she thought about the ranch, the open skies, the freedom, the home they had built together. I choose the ranch, she said. I choose you. John's face softened with relief and something deeper. He leaned forward and for the first time gently kissed her. I love you, he said simply. Not because you saved the colony or because you're strong, just because you're you. Diana felt warmth spread through her chest. In the factories on Earth, labor girls were never told they were loved. They were told they were useful, productive, valuable as tools. But John saw beyond her enhancements to the woman beneath. I love you too, she said, the words new and wonderful on her lips. 3 weeks later, they returned to the ranch. As they drove through the settlement, people waved and called out greetings. Diana Wells, once rejected as not human enough, was now recognized as the woman who had saved them all. But Diana found she didn't need their approval anymore. She had found acceptance where it mattered most, with John and within herself. As the ranch house came into view, silhouetted against Novaris's setting sun, she took John's hand. Home, she said. John squeezed her hand gently. Home, he agreed.